Tilly!
Yeah.
You are mad! You are mad!
Well, a bit of a sad video today. We got a chance to get out camping. The restrictions have lifted to the point where you're allowed to have 2 families out and about. When you are out sort of around people, you're supposed to have a mask on, and it was all good. Hurrah! Except where we're camping, it's a really good spot, really popular, because it's a really lovely spot, and it's got the toilet, which is something that Sarah insists on. But there's just more and more people turning up, and no one's wearing masks. You know, it's really one of the things that was said about, or is said about, a lot of the COVID rules is that they were ridiculously harsh, way over the top. But what doesn't seem to be understood, it's not just about making rules that are sensible, it's also about making rules that will actually work. And I think this rule that people may go camping as long as it's limited to 2 families is an example where it doesn't work. And possibly even the rule that people are allowed to go camping is a rule that isn't going to work. Because most people are going to go camping at spots where other people are camping. And it was just so hard to try and tell the kids not to go play with those kids over there because their parents have arrived in a car with New South Wales plates. They just didn't, like, Morag's old enough to understand, but the other kids, not so much. And they want to go play with the other kids. I want them to go play with the other. And then there's the additional thing that one of the reasons we like this camping spot is because it's dog friendly. You're allowed to take your dogs and you're allowed to have them off the lead. And so people who like dogs tend to go camping at this spot. And in addition to Lucky, there was 5 or 6 other dogs, all pretty well behaved. But there's this research that COVID can be transmitted via dogs to humans. It's just, you know, and this is the bind that the decision makers are in. Is that okay? Where do you draw the line? Now they've got access to the data, so maybe they've accounted for that kind of level of rural dysfunction to be happening while people are camping, and they've accounted for that. Maybe not. But I think it really shows that it's not just about whether the rules, understanding whether the rules make sense or not. You have to look at it from another level, not just whether, oh, that's silly. You are a big sook. Come on in, if you're coming. All is now right with the world, isn't it, Lucky? Is that better? Don't look at me like that. There's 2 aspects of my character which are slamming into each other. One is my desire to obey the rules, my knowledge of, you know, how germs work and how, you know, they transmit, and the nature and the statistics of it. My knowledge of history and various other pandemics that we've had through the centuries. So they're very sensible rules. They might be a bit arbitrary, but they're arbitrary for a reason. And so I want to obey them. But that's smacking into one of the things I like about camping is the meeting of random people and getting a chance to be friendly and, you know, share the fire and chat and all those sort of things. And you just can't do it. Not obey the rules at the same time. And as the site's getting more crowded, we've got people wanting to share the fire, and then we're cooking at the same place and hanging around the same place, and social distancing is just a joke. And again, it comes back to no one's wearing masks. Now, it's an outdoor environment, so maybe that's not such a big thing. But wearing a mask in a pandemic is a virtue signal. And it's a lot of people deride virtue signals as, you know, totally bad and pointless, but they're a really useful tool. And in this situation, if someone is virtue signaling by wearing a mask, then it's a reasonable bet that they're following the other rules as well. Whereas when you see them turn up and they sort of want to come next to the fire with you, and there's a New South Wales plate on their car, oh, you kind of wonder whether they're actually obeying any of the rules, whether just not wearing the mask. And I think it's really sad, but I think we're going to have to pull the pin and go home. I've got so much work on at the moment. I've got this document that I've got to, well, supposed to have already had the first draft fully complete and off to get reviewed. And I could justify this time away to get my brain, reset and de-stressed and get back into it fresh. But it's just, I think it's just too difficult not being friendly with people, not being, open, not being accommodating, having to say, look, I'd really prefer you didn't share the fire with us, go away. Like, that's not in my nature to do, so I'd rather run away. No, I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm particularly prone to anxiety, social anxiety, as the sort of, to do things that have happened in my life previously, but also my place on the autism spectrum. And it's just too hard. So we're going to pack up. I'm going to go home. I'm going to hide. If we were all vaccinated, different story. Once we've got our vaccinations in place and there's been time for the immune systems to build up and, for the vaccines to actually have had a chance to work, we're just going to have to live with things. But right now, it's just too dicey. Not with all these cases popping up all over the place. And I don't know whether I'm being logical or whether I'm just caving into my anxiety, but I'm going to go home. So, bugger. So, I wanted to add a couple of things to what I was saying there. This anxiety had been building since we first arrived, because as soon as I got out of the car, there was this other couple there that Sarah wanted to introduce me to, and they weren't wearing a mask, and I wasn't wearing a mask because I'd been driving. I just sort of got out of the car, and these people are coming up to me, and I hadn't had a chance to put it on. And Sarah had said that she felt I'd been a bit standoffish and not very friendly, and this is a really common, really common thing, even for people, the loved ones of people who are on the autism spectrum, is that we come across as antisocial. When what was actually happening is I was having all these feelings of social anxiety because I didn't want to offend, and I wanted to make a good impression, and I wanted to be friendly, but I didn't feel I was constrained, and I didn't know how to communicate that. And previous experiences, so many previous experiences, when we've tried to explain things to other people, how we would, if they could do things in a slightly different way, and we would be more comfortable with that, then we've offended them, and then that's gone horribly wrong. So we have this huge reluctance to do it, but then that causes this problem because then we're not meeting our own needs or feeling secure in our own it's just a horrid cycle. And for me, and not all people on the spectrum are social or want to be social, but for me, I love spending time with people. It's just really hard and difficult and exhausting. So that was from when I first arrived. Also making it harder to navigate this whole process was a bunch of other stuff going on. And Sarah wasn't there. And the reason Sarah wasn't there is because we were having some problems with our boy, our eldest, Edward. He's got this incredibly rare genetic condition. It's a relatively new condition. It was first described in December 2018. He was case study number 2 in the article that described the condition. And incidentally, he is the oldest of all the kids in the world that have this condition. And when I say the oldest, he's the oldest of all 10 of them. And the reason there's only 10 is because it's a really rare condition, but one of the reasons it's really rare is because they tend to die young. So you can understand that life can be a bit tricky looking after him. One of the latest developments in his condition is that because he is fed via a tube, he doesn't get anything in his mouth. And we do brush his teeth, but because he doesn't eat anything, his teeth are all over the place and malformed, and the natural chewing reaction as you eat tends to partially clean your teeth. So what tends to happen with kids that are 100% peg fed is they get up all these build-ups on their teeth of plaque, which can't be removed, by just normal brushing. And that plaque gets to the point where it actually starts to cut their gums. Now what is happening with him is that his gums are being cut, he's bleeding, he's fed by the peg because he can't swallow properly, so the bleeding is causing this issue of microaspiration or even aspiration. But the most recent development is that he's got this great big, these blood clots that are forming around the bleeding gums. And if one of those blood clots dislodges, then we're in all sorts of trouble, which is of course one of the reasons why it's one of the reasons why these kids are young, is because there's just all these complications. And and this is one of the reasons why we're extra concerned about COVID, because if he ends up in hospital and we're in a triage situation, almost anyone is going to rank higher than him on the triage list because his comorbidities are so severe. And Sarah was talking about the possibility of having to go to the children's to get these blood clots dealt with. They won't deal with the plaque and the bleeding gums because it's a chronic issue. It's not an acute issue, but it could be an acute issue because then he could aspirate, and then we get aspiration pneumonia, and then we're in a whole world of blah. And it's just, and she's trying to deal with that at home. I'm getting little snippets of it. I'm trying not to think about it because I'm trying to relax. And it's just, so in the end, and I'm stressed out because I'm worried about what, Sarah's mum and her Uncle Kevin, who have come camping with us, are going to be thinking about me pulling the pin and blah, blah, because they changed all their plans to fit in with us, to go camping with us. And so I've got this anxiety about how they're going to feel and how they're going to respond, and what they're going to think of me. But the beautiful thing about the family that I married into is they're so loving, they're so accepting. I got home after we packed up the camp and we got home. I lost it. I was a gibbering mess, and I just hid in here, away from everyone. But one of the things that Sandra and Kevin said as they were sort of having a cup out there with Sarah before they went home was that one is that they didn't need to say goodbye to me. It was they were fine. They'll just leave me in here. And in particular, Kevin said I'd made the right call. Not based on my own anxiety reasons or anything, but just made the right call based on the COVID risk and the way people were behaving. And he said to Sarah, not to me because I was hiding, that he was glad that I'd made that call. So maybe I made the call just because of my anxiety. I didn't feel like I was being logical. There's a whole stack of emotions, and I didn't really have a grip on them. But I am incredibly grateful to the family that I have married into, because they're awesome. And given what the family I was born into has been doing to me lately, it makes me extra appreciate them. So yes, stay safe. Look after yourself, I think would probably be the main message in this video. I'll catch you guys later. Oh, and and walking in your son first thing in the morning and see blood pouring out of your mouth because at the first day this has happened means, and that was about a week and a half ago, and it's been a thing we've been trying to manage since that time. It just adds to it, and this is the other thing, is that it's another layer. It's another thing. It's another thing on top of a thing, on top of a thing, on top of a thing, on top of a thing. For example, at the same time, the supplier of the specially formulated formula that we have to feed him through his PEG they had the courier that they used to distribute the formula to families like us, they had a COVID case in the warehouse. And so they shut the warehouse down. And that meant that our formula delivery was disappeared. And it was supposed to arrive, and we're running out of formula. We've got no food to feed him, and we can't get any. Fortunately, that problem was resolved through the brilliance of some incredible people at the Royal Children's Hospital, and the excellent persistence of Sarah. But it's just like dealing. I know a lot of people are doing it tough out there, and compared to a lot of families out there when it comes to COVID, we're not really that badly affected by it, as long as we stay home. But there was just looking after a kid like him, like Edward. It's a never-ending process of crisis management. Yeah, bye. It's a never-ending process of crisis management.